Welcome to the latest series of the FODcast, where we bring you the latest insights into the future of digital commerce. In Season 6, we continue to interview some of the most respected professionals in the industry as we broaden the topics to cover what it takes to build a business within e-commerce, navigating through business change, as well as the future of technology within digital commerce. As we continue our journey to have one of the best podcasts within commerce, we ask you to like and share within your network if you enjoy our content.
So welcome to our episode on fractional hiring and the use of executive leadership on a fractional basis. Gareth, thank you for joining us. Much appreciated.
No problem.
So we've known each other for about 10, 11 years.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, back in the Belron days originally. And you have been, you've worked many places, Sainsbury's, Home Retail Group, Virgin, to name but a few.
Yes, that's right. I did my first e-commerce site at Air Miles in 1999, so that's how long I've been doing digital transformation. And yes, I did Argos as interim, and recently, at Virgin Wines and Wiggle, unfortunately, before they went into administration. But I've got experience in the last 3 roles at Inchcape and Virgin and Wiggle around kind of composable architecture and what you need to do to move to it. So it's quite interesting for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And interesting for us and the audience too, just to get a bit of context. And the thing that really has changed, I think, for me, and the thing I wanted to talk to you about and understand better your experiences is that element of the use of fractional resources, particularly executive leadership level. So fractional is not an unusual or it's not a new thing. And as you will well know, it's been something that has been utilized by businesses for a long period. But the difference for me right now that I'm seeing, that I want to understand your view on, is how it's becoming more and more prevalent. And effectively what we're seeing, both anecdotally through conversations that I'm having, but also with some of the data that we are tracking internally with both the client's demands, the placements we're making, and then the conversations we're having, is that there is an increasing demand for someone as a CTO, COO, CFO, CMO to come in on a day a week, a day and a half a week to help ensure the project is being delivered, the strategy is right, the direction's right, but not on the expected 5 days a week. I have some thoughts around that and around particularly how digital commerce and that transition from monolith implementation to your more favored headless, composable, microservices-driven architecture is impacting it.
Yeah,
I guess the thing I'd like to understand from you is are you seeing the same thing? And if you are, what are your initial thoughts?
yes, I am. In fact, I'm currently doing a piece of consultant work with Rafa, who just embarked on the same journey as Wiggle, and have some of the similar problems, right? And I think the main thing is that for mid-market companies, Composable, Mac Alliance will sell the dream of Composable, and to be fair, I agree with a lot of the principles. I think they, it sounds like it's a dream scenario of total flexibility. You can leverage these platforms that have best of breed functionality. But the reality in a mid-market company is that they rarely, it appears, and I think this is why they're looking for more capability, they don't have the experience or the capability at that level to take on what is quite a complex architecture, and therefore quite a complex program of work to implement and manage ongoing, and they don't really know how to organize themselves to implement something as complex as that, and they don't have the level of capability in their tech team often to implement something. They'll use an external agency, but you need somebody with the experience to manage that external agency and manage the process and make sure you're organized to deliver it. And I don't think a lot of them understand the level of complexity they're taking on in that mid-market space. And I've got a view on whether it's really appropriate in the mid-market space. But we can get to that later.
And so if we're focusing just on mid-market at the moment, why would that complexity require people to come in on a fractional basis though? Because you could look at it and think, okay, we need a CTO and we hire CTO as we historically have done.
Bluntly, mid-market company, a 50 to 100 million pound company can't afford a CTO with the level of experience they need. I mean, and that's the basic maths, right? And therefore they need that, and they're either going to bring that person as a consultant for a period of time to help them define how they're going to go about it, or, and I think it's better for them that they have that person on a fractional basis to kind of oversee that that transition and help the team with and apply that experience throughout the program. And it makes more financial sense to do that because they wouldn't be able to afford, a mid-market company like Rafa can't afford to pay someone with the level of experience that I've got who might have come from a CTO role in much bigger organization, who's already implemented an architecture like this, or has been through digital transformation a number of times in global organizations and that kind of stuff. They are not going to have the ability to hire somebody at that level full time.
Yeah, and actually, some of the things we have seen in the past is, although they can't afford to hire that person, the cost of not having that person around can be far greater. And I think that's what leads to that. Okay, well, actually, if we can have someone in a day a week to help avoid some of those pitfalls, we could save a fortune moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's the basic equation for these companies, and they're probably, even if they could afford somebody at that level, it's only going to be for a short period of time. They really need them, and they need to go into BAU that's a lower cost than that, right? They can't afford to increase their IT costs significantly, and that is one of the dangers of moving into Composable for a mid-market company, which I can expand on as we go through.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So we talked about the Mac dream, and there's lots of conversation around is Composable right for everyone? I think there's more understanding now of how complex it is. But I guess it'd be good to know what are the specifics around the complexities of Composable and headless that you think are impacting exec leadership at a fractional level.
Well, I think it's very different implementing. So I'll start on the suitability. You go down the Mac dream, as I call it, and the Mac Alliance will tell you that it's much cheaper. License fees will be lower, things like that. That is not true. I'm afraid that is not true for a mid-market company. For a mid-market company, just taking, I won't name the example, but example of historic, hybrid type tool at that level, it's 200 or 300K a year. You take on a Mac architecture where you've got to buy 5 products to do the same job, and then you've got to build a middleware solution, which is actually your e-commerce platform with the level of complexity that involves, and your license costs are more like 750K a year. And you don't have the scale to get the volume discounts that you need to get to be able to make that work, or have the level of capability of your team to be able to run and manage what is a complex architecture. Okay, I was speaking to somebody yesterday who ex-Accenture on a similar journey in another retail organization, and we both agreed actually probably the cutoff where it really makes sense is more like a 1 or 2 billion pound company before you have the capability in your team and the ability to hire a exec CTO who's got the capability to run a program of that complexity, and you've got the money to be able to manage it on day 2 and into BAU, which is the other bit which you see a big lack of maturity in the mid-market companies, how to organize themselves to run an agile delivery, and then what to do on day 2 in terms of running that in BAU, and how you manage requirements and prioritization when you've got 5 different platforms you need to change, right? And it, beyond the license cost, it means you probably need a bigger product team, because you need with Composable a much more technically able product management team, It's no good just to throw requirements over the fence to technology to tech anymore. You need to understand those products, and actually you need the capability to be able to run and manage those products. You take a product like Algolia Search, to optimize that, you need a full-time person whose job it is to manage the new menus, optimize the search, optimize the navigation, all of that, ongoing. And maybe it's half a role, but those jobs don't exist in the old world of Hybris or WebSphere, right? So I think that understanding of what you need to do to organize yourself is part of the bit that's missing in mid-market companies, because they're often immature in their delivery processes and immature in their capabilities around product management.
And that's interesting, because you talk about the Algolia example and you said it's half a job. So is it then going to be more than exec leadership where you'll start to see this demand for fractional?
Well, I think what you end up doing is having to have an ecom team who might have had to learn one product, having to learn multiple products, right? And people aren't necessarily prepared for that. So it might be half a job doing that, but it might be half a job managing, configuring the PIM and optimizing the PIM so that you can make the most of it. And having those people who can configure it, so you don't go to IT dev every time you want to change something. And that I've seen in other organizations, right, where every time you want to do something, you've got to involve the IT development team. You shouldn't have to do that in Composable. That's the point of getting powerful tools that are configurable and manageable by basically super users. Okay, but I don't think they've geared themselves up for that. And I think, and that's probably true in the CMO, in the marketing space as well, in terms of that capability and the thought process. One of the things you can do when you've got a Mac architecture is go to true omni-channel marketing. So you can do full cross-channel campaigns where you have search and content and email and social all managed, with a single kind of campaign idea across all of these systems that will allow you easily to use the same content in multiple channels and all of those things that you can use with one of these new content management systems. But exploiting that and having the capability and the people to exploit that in marketing, that isn't really there either, or the knowledge or the experience to be able to do that. So I think in a lot of cases in mid-market, either they need to import that on a fractional basis, or they need to think really hard about whether they really are going to be able to exploit these tools to their maximum. If you're a £2 billion company, you're going to have the people that you can exploit this. Are you going to ever manage that if you're a mid-market company and you've got an ecom team of 2 people?
Yeah,
I don't know.
And that's what I was trying to understand, is how far into the organizational structure will this permeate with these complexities, and therefore the wider scope of skills needed, and how much of that they can actually hire full time, and how much will have to be on a fractional basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the problem they have is, as at the exec level, at that mid level, getting somebody who's got the capability to do all of those things, it's a different kind of role to what it was before. And I've been in smaller organizations where they have good people in those roles, and therefore it would easily work. But other ones where they're quite junior roles in the existing organization, and their level of capability, for example, in marketing, isn't what you'd expect it from a much larger organization. So there are implications if you really want to exploit this. If your goal of putting this in is actually, as everyone has said to me, yeah, we're going to increase conversion. Well, how? And right? Yeah, okay, we can. We probably can, because we can do like cross-channel marketing campaigns. We can create merchandisable areas across the site and in the menus, and have switchable, personalized banner ads on every category page and all the rest of it. But you need some people who can A, come up with those offers, and B, who can manage that so that it works.
Yeah.
And target the right people with the right campaigns and all the rest of it. And that level of capability in marketing to actually exploit the platform you're putting in place, I think, is one of the gaps. You're not going to, just by putting this in, you're not going to suddenly get a conversion uplift, right? It's not going to be the case.
So what I'm understanding from this then is actually the composable and headless implementations are going to directly impact the business strategy, but are they thinking about that before they're going down this route? And actually, is that part of the issue?
My experience of recent is no, they're not actually, and they don't understand the implications of that, or they're not aware of what the actually opportunities they're creating, because that's the way to get the value out of it. You know, if they're adding £500,000 to their IT license costs, that's quite a lot of sales in most retail organisations that you've got to increase for it to even pay for itself, let alone drive growth in it. And I think this perception that somehow just by replacing the old clunky platform, you're going to get this brilliant new nirvana is something that, you know, I think companies don't really understand at that level. And that's why I said I can see not only a need for kind of that fractional CTO, but the fractional CMO who's got that experience of having done that in a bigger organization and bring that to bear, and on the marketing strategy and how they organize themselves to make the most of these platforms, I think is another area where I think that's where there's a gap in a lot of these mid-market companies.
So in your position then, and this is obviously, there's two really recent examples of you coming in as a fractional CTO and seeing some of these problems. What do you think are the main organizational and cultural, because there's also buy-in as much as anything else, but the organizational and cultural adaptations that you're looking to see in a business or you're trying to implement when they're going, right, we're going composable, that's already been decided?
Yeah. I think one of the things that, and it was an issue, a wiggle that we fixed, is that you really have to be clear and organized in how you manage your agile delivery, right? When you take on one of these things, you expect to have an ongoing development of the suite of products. But now you've got 5 products, right? And you need technical capability to be able to understand what the solution is. And you need to be able to pull that together. And if you're prioritizing where the most value is going to be added for the next new feature, that is now a more complex answer. And you need the right level of people, but also the right level of organization to properly prioritize that and funnel it into your agile delivery funnel. It also makes delivering big projects somewhat more complex. You know, in some cases, if you've done it right the first time, it will make some of those big projects easier. We want to launch a new brand. We need a new white label site. Right, we can do that. We can clone that in 3 months now, where it would have taken a year. But you have to have that organization and that agile delivery process quite slick to make it work, especially when you've got a much more complex architecture that you've got to deliver it through. And I expect that you will need to understand that you will probably have to outsource a bunch of that capability, because you're never really going to be able to get that level of architect and developer capability in-house, or it's unlikely that you will.
Yeah.
And that cost is something you need to take into account when you're taking on a platform like this.
Yeah. And again, we're still talking at that SME below 1 billion level.
Yeah, I think if you go upwards, if I think of Argos, let's say we were doing this, I was doing this again at Argos, and we were replatforming their WebSphere platform. We actually managed with WebSphere to take some of the stuff out of it. And I know they've been continuing on that journey. I don't know where they are with that now, but it's a much more viable proposition, because the level of capability you've got in your architecture team, in your technical delivery team, they may be outsourced anyway at that level. And it's a much easier thing to manage. And you've probably got that capability in marketing to know what they want to do to exploit it. We certainly had that at Argos with Mark Steele, and he works for Google now, who ran the e-commerce operations, you know, and knowing what you could do to exploit the tools we were putting in place, you know, 100% got that capability. And so I think for the big companies, if they don't have it, they can hire a full-time person at that level who does.
Yeah.
Right? They've got the budget to be able to hire a 250 grand CTO or a 300 grand marketing director, but the mid-market companies haven't got that luxury, and hence that's why I think that's the rise of the fractional CTO. I think is greater with this composable architecture. I think there are other reasons. There are obviously other reasons that people hire fractional, and I think that comes down to this: rather than getting a consultant in for 6 weeks and paying them X, let's pay them X over a whole year and get their input on a regular basis across the year, so we can really support the in-house CIO, whatever, to raise the capability of the team. And I think that works quite well. And it also, and I used it in both Virgin and in Wiggle, in terms of fractional CTO, but also fractional CISO and fractional DPO. Have you got the level of capability to have a full-time DPO or full-time CISO? Probably not. You haven't got the budget. Can you buy that as a service, either from an individual or from a company now? Yes, you can. Right? You can buy CISO as a service. You can buy DPO as a service, and therefore you get that level of capability. Instead of paying somebody 80 grand a year to be your head of information security, you can pay a company 15 grand a year and get that ongoing capability, or you pay a fractional to come in, and it's, you're talking about 15, 20 grand a year instead of 80 to get that, to bring that level of capability to your smaller organization. And that's why I think it's become more prevalent, really.
Yeah, I would agree. I hadn't really thought about the CISO piece, if I'm honest, but it absolutely makes sense as well.
That's another one where, you really need a high level of capability to understand and lay out that strategy and program of how to get to that level. Often you have the people who can do the work, but it's understanding what you need to do and on all of those things where you need that level. And it's very similar to the CTO. It's often there is a level of capability there, but have you got somebody who's got leadership to help lead that and organize themselves to deliver it, as much as it is about the technical capability or technical knowledge? It's that ability to lead and organize that they're lacking.
Yeah. Well, I guess for me, the last question is where is this going in your view? Is this the new normal? Is this just a short period whilst we move from monolith to composable and headless and work out how that looks?
I think there is I think that these immediate reasons around composable, I think there will be something so I know a few people in the industry, and the way my mate who runs one of the e-commerce organizations described it as a backlash in the mid-market area. And I think the right answer for most mid-market companies is actually to go with something more simple, something from an e-commerce platform that maybe does 80% of it out of the box, but actually, we'd rather have a better search and merge. So we'll have Shopify and we'll have Algolia, and we need a PIM to organize. We got 3 products and not 6. And we don't have to have a complex architecture to integrate them all, because actually we can integrate those at the front end because there's only 2 things to do. And I think that is probably the long term for the mid-market. Will that actually impact that requirement for fractional CTOs? I don't know. I think there's some element it might, but on the other hand, I think just that question of what journey should we take is quite a difficult one to answer. And actually there's quite and that might end up being more consulting and advisory rather than fractional, but there is definitely a lack of, and certainly I found that in some of the smaller organizations I've recently worked with, just a lack of understanding of what they're really taking on and what it means, and what choices should they be making technology wise, and having people who've actually done it. There aren't that many CTOs out there who've actually done it successfully. I think that's the other thing, and therefore, I don't see the need for fractional going away, because I think those other reasons for fractional around that being able to buy a level of enterprise capability for a fraction of the cost of hiring somebody that you can't afford to hire. I think that's an ongoing need, as things become more technical and more complex and the tools become more powerful, you want to be able to exploit them, and you probably can't afford to have people that level of capability full time, anyway, as a mid-market company.
Yeah. Well, time will tell.
It will.
For the next 9 to 12 months, I guess we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think you'll see. I mean, I do think that a lot of it is this drive for Composable, this Nirvana. I've got a lot of time for the Mac Alliance, but I think they do sell a dream, and it is driven. The Mac Alliance is a load of vendors at the end of the day who are trying to sell their composable architecture products, and therefore they have a certain message around what that means and what a great idea it is. And actually, maybe they should be bending their message for mid-market companies to say, well, actually, there's variations on Mac. You don't have to go the full way, but there are advantages even to going halfway on the journey and going headless with something that's more out of the box, like a BigCommerce or a Shopify or whatever it is, that will take you on that journey. And if you grow as a company, well, in the future, because you've built it in a composable way, even with more capability, you'll be able to potentially go down the full Mac journey, but do it at a pace, at a point where you can A, afford it, and B, actually have the capability to exploit the tools that you're putting in.
Yeah, makes sense to me, and I'm sure the oncoming Maclash will maybe help them to rethink their message slightly. We'll find out soon, won't we?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is our first ever podcast short. Been very insightful. I've learned a huge amount, but yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's been enjoyable.